Let's do this. Who's ready to party? It's Friday. Yeah.
Nice. I like that.
So I don't know how it happened, but last time I basically had like a half of a minute to try and explain what happened in a week with myself at the glorious event called OSCON. And so I did the most like notes on this how to give presentations, which sounds like really boring and like sleep-worthy, but it's probably the coolest thing that you will ever hear in your lives. Okay, not to build it up too much. So I'm going to try to go through this again. I read through it again, and so I kind of know what I was talking about now, whereas like before I was like looking through it and I'm like, huh? Yeah, so let's just get to it. I'm breaking a serious rule by kind of reading through the slides a little bit, but even reading through the slides, I think this is going to be pretty awesome, and I think you'll like it. And when I send this out later, you'll want to hold on to it and reference it for later. So it's called Presentation Ninjutsu. I heard about this talk last OSCON. Everybody's like, oh my God, it's amazing, right? I'm like, cool, I got the videos for OSCON. I'm going to check it out. I looked at the videos. It's not on there. And then I found out this guy does not allow this thing to be videoed. He doesn't allow it to be part of it. He like doesn't want, he wants it to be like you only know about this if you show up. So I thought, you know, the most value I could bring back from OSCON, honestly, knowing how good this thing is just to give mostly this presentation and kind of breeze through the rest of it. So that's what I'm gonna try to do. We're gonna like go walk through this a little bit, and then we'll just kind of like highlights of the rest of OSCON, which there's some good stuff in there, but anyway. So presentation structure. So he starts off talking a lot about the rule of 3, and not just like 3 as in, like he uses 3 everywhere, right? Like 3 parts of your presentation, right? Like divide it up into 3. When you're giving reasons, give 3 reasons. Is used by politicians. And 4 reasons, I guess, sounds really fishy. That's interesting. He said something, the ascending tricolon, 3 things ascending in impact and significance. So when he talks about that, he says, basically, when you structure your presentation, you want to like give a better reason each time, and he'll talk about that a little bit later. So presentation structure, challenge problem, response solution, autopsy details. Let's see. So he talks about using that structure to like create some conflict and add some emotion. You create a conflict, a change that needs to be resolved, a problem needs to be resolved, difficulty. And you'll notice like I kind of wrote down as he was going, like he would give 3 reasons for everything, and it just is kind of soothing for some reason. Like, oh, cool, 3 reasons. I trust it. So he would say like conflict solution. The examples you give is current versus proposed, the reason versus emotional, fear versus hope. Now, immediately, you guys believe the crap out of me. So that's pretty cool. So he's a manufacturer conflict. The audience wants the presentation to succeed. So he goes into a little bit of detail on like how to do that. So when you tell your story, the 3 stages of conflict for your audience, you solve the problem, right? So everybody's like, oh, cool. And then an unexpected problem occurs, right? So this is leading into the second part, right? Expected solution. So they try it out. Oh, yeah, this is going to be great. Another failure. So then you drop them down again. At this point, the people watching have like an investment. They're like, dude, I don't want this to fail again. Please tell me what the answer is. So then you provide a successful outcome. So the result is more satisfying from that. Every point has a crescendo. As I was saying, like they build on top of each other. The reason you want the next one to be better than the last one is because you're going to basically crap on your like subsequent points if like the points before it are just not as cool, right? So the 3 sections, topic 1, 2, 3. If you've got too much information, put it in a bonus topic, and if you have time, you can use it for later. It's always better to like plan to do less, and then if you have time, do a little bit more. And then everybody feels like, oh, they're just getting something extra. It's not like a really long presentation, right? So it's kind of like a false ending. Audience feels like they've got some value from that. If you have too many, like, remove the second most interesting topic and like, add that as your bonus. So somebody asked if it was, I'm not going to cover that. Screw that. There's some question, and if you were curious about the answer, to see. Use pausing. This is interesting. He's like, so you want to use pausing like more than you would naturally because you know the material and the audience doesn't. And so the longer you pause also, you should plan that for the bigger the impact of what you're saying. Like if it's more significant, you pause longer. And he gave an example. Where is it? I thought I wrote it down somewhere. But shit, I put it down. Anyway, we'll get to if it's in there. So, but it's kind of interesting. So you say something that's like, if you use longer pauses, then people will, like, if it's more important, pay attention more, right? Right? You just like soak that in so much better, right? So then he goes from that into doing presentations to convince people. And this is where it gets really interesting, I think, because he talks about the three parts of people that you have to, like three different like psyche parts that you have to address. And it's their logical side, their ethical side, and their emotional side. And those are in order of their, from like least important to most important. And so is what you're saying true? Is it accurate? If you acknowledge deficiencies, limitations, and uncertainties, they're going to believe you more likely, right? So then there's the ethical side. Is it a scam or honest? Don't sugarcoat it. If you acknowledge deficiencies, limitations, and uncertainties, it's more likely to increase trust, right? Like they trust that what you're saying is true and ethical. So then there's emotional side. And if you're not passionate, it's less likely to resonate. It's not as likely for it to seem important if you don't have any passion behind what you're saying. So again, the three parts, right? Logic convinces correct, ethics convinces acceptable, and emotion convinces importance. So 5 steps to sell. Arouse, like your curiosity, create a personal need. So knowing your audience, like say the problem that like they can relate to, solve their problem, offer a bright future, rationally, morally, emotionally, and then ask for immediate action. So when you arouse curiosity, you like start with some shocking statement that's like, huh, oh man, that's making me think about stuff, right? Then you state the problem and you make it relevant to them, right? Knowing your audience, thinking about who's going to be listening to it. So let's see. The key here is like people are afraid of losing more than the desire of gaining. So like the way you structure it, if you're trying to convince people, is you have to like present it as a loss to them somehow, right? And because like for just to gain something, that's not as interesting, or I guess it's not as impactful when you're trying to convince somebody. So then you solve their problem, and you do it rationally, ethically, emotionally. It's got to be logically correct, good for everyone, and you'll feel better, right? So, and really to hit this home, like you envision the 2 possible futures, right? So if it's something that they're gaining, you have to structure it as like you paint the picture of like the perfect future, like what their world is like with this change, right? And then you take it away from them by contrasting it with like some like if you don't do anything, there's dire consequences, right? So every time the future is better and less stressful. So then you have your call to action at the end. You have to like get them to do something. So you make it really simple. You say next steps, and you like be really, really specific so that it's hard to mess up, right? And you don't give people a lot of options. You give them like 2 options, right? So you can either do this failed way that's going to hurt you, right? Or go with this way that's like, obviously going to be a lot better. And then there was a side note of telling people about these psychological tricks doesn't make them less effective, which was funny and interesting, right? So I really wish I could find that statement in there. Okay, so yeah, 3 steps maximum if there's like steps, like not like email somebody, do this, go to this website, check your email later, do this other, you know, it's like, yeah, forget about it. So yeah, that's your, like, got to be your call to action. You want people to act immediately. So the vocabulary stuff was like really interesting. And this kind of ties into some of the things that I said earlier. But so you want to use personal anecdotes, which are like, are better than these like lame facts, right? Interesting, right? Still in the context of like a convincing like proposal. Humans believe short sentences more than long ones. I use personal anecdotes. They're more believable. Pause, right? So make use of loss aversion by expressing outcome as a way of avoiding loss. For example, if you don't sign up this week, if you sign up this week, you'll save 15%, as opposed to 15% discount until Friday. You're going to miss out on that discount. You know, this approach makes better data versus this approach avoids lawsuits. You know, like one's going to be a little more like motivating than the other. So, and humans don't like different and controversial things. So when you're talking about something different in software, typically, right, there's a lot of language things you can do to like to make like ease the transition. Like, for instance, you can say, as I'm sure you're aware, or no doubt, obviously, like saying things like that. It's like, oh, I mean, obviously I know about that, you know, like, so when you're like introducing things, it's really interesting. Some of this is kind of like shady-ish sounding, but like the effects are like, they're real. And especially if you believe in this thing, right? Then like, yeah, there's a lot of like, people would ask like, dude, what, like this sounds like you're gaming people. Like what's like, you know, why would you do that or something, right? And it, you know, the response that he had a lot of times was like focused on, well, I mean, you should be talking about something that you actually believe in, right? Like if you don't really believe in it, then like people are going to see through that, right? There's got to be some authenticity there. But these are things that like help sort of like, you know, get your point across better, you know, and help actually bring people together. So it's good to like take a step back and like think, okay, this works on people, right? So how can you like use it for good, right? Can't be afraid of technology. Try to use it for good. So, and then you give them 2 choices. One's obviously ridiculous and they're not going to do that. And then the dream case, right? So give them only 2 decisions. 3 decisions is a paradox and creates paralysis, right? So like think about your loss aversion in that case, right? If you give people like 8 options of something to do, then they're going to be like, oh shit, I'd rather not choose at all because like 8 options, I could lose. Like if any one of those options is the right option, I'm going to lose out big time, right? So you narrow it down to 2 for that reason. That's interesting to think about, I think. So every choice makes it twice as hard, and eventually you don't want to choose, right? So then I already kind of gave this away, but there's like a secret to convincing talks, and it's like this one simple trick, right? This hidden knowledge. It's a big secret, actually. There's very few people that know about it. It's this one weird technique. Brian Joseph can stop flipping me off, but so a lot of people probably aren't aware of this. Most people have no idea how to, right? All these things are like creating this mystery, right? Which kind of contrasts like the idea that when you give a presentation, you tell them what you're going to tell them, and then you tell them what you told them, right? Because there's no mystery there if you do that. And actually that was kind of brought up, that was earlier, I skipped it. So lexical persuasion, this is so cool. Trigger words. So the most powerful trigger word is because, right? So if you say something and then you say because that, then like, for whatever reason, people freaking believe you. Like, I don't know why. Like, it's just like, your brain will notice the correlation. It's more about like how your brain works when you like hear sentences and you like translate things into meaning, right? If you hear because, then like you immediately like store that in your brain as like something that like, oh, this because that, right? It's this weird subtle thing. Now it doesn't mean you're not gonna be like, oh, he just said orange because black or something. It's like, what? You're like, that's garbage, throw that out. But I thought this was kind of cool. So dot, 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 or a powerful pause, right? So like saying something and then like, is like, has a really big impact, right? People like stop and they like think about it. And it like, you know, deepens the synapses in your brain to like, oh, I'm gonna like, you know, remember that stuff. So you saying or, and that's actually good just to like be careful of. Like if you say or, you are potentially invalidating the things you said before. And it's like a natural psychological thing where like you say da 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 or da da da, then potentially you're like, if you're trying to convince somebody of the thing before it, you're like lessening the value of it and people aren't going to believe it as much, right? The other one was cool is negation, right? So like if you say can't, don't, doesn't, people will ignore those negative parts of it. For example, don't take my word for it translates to take my word for it, right? Like you just immediately internally are like, oh, I know, I kind of want to take this. And then the other side of this is you complete it with unless. So you say, don't decide now unless you're ready. So it's like, decide now, you're ready. You know what I mean? Like it translates into that. It's really interesting. And then the last thing with that is that humans don't trust outsiders normally. Like it's kind of like tribe pack mentality, right? Like in social circles. And so the way to break through with that is to change all of your you, I into we, you know, like we talked about this, we explored this area, we learned this, right? You're saying things that like connect you with your audience so that like you're going through it together. You're like part of the tribe, right? And so that is the last part of the convincing thing. And then he did this bonus topic, which was the art and science of better delivery. And there's a lot of like really, really quick facts of like all the stuff he does. I will. And I'll let you read through this later because I'm not going to read through all these. But there's a lot of like really cool like do this, do that, do this, do that. And it's all about like when you show up to present, what you check, what you do, like just very quick, like just do these things and it's better. So that was pretty cool, right? Like thumbs up, thumbs down. That was kind of interesting. I thought so. Okay, so let's see what we got for the rest of this. Introduction to planning and running tech events. I'm going to be honest with you. So I'm personally interested in like doing like more tech event stuff, right? And this was done by some people that were like tech evangelists. Like they have that job, and so one of the things they do is run events. And there are some interesting things there, and like how much things actually cost. Like on a high level, it's like basically you wouldn't believe what hotels charge, basically, right? And like the thing that they get you on is the meals, right? They don't let you provide meals. They say you have to use our kitchen, and then they charge like $100 a meal for everybody. So immediately your budget for a certain size of people goes like out the window. So, but there's some kind of cool stuff. If you're interested in event stuff, you can check out this stuff. So clearly I put a lot of stuff down for that. And there's some interesting facts in there. You can read through it. Wah, wah, wah. And then there's emails. Rust is amazing. Try it out. There's like tutorials online. It's great. Haskell / you know, whatever, type safe language. It's cool. Try it out. Visualizing Flux. Oh, this one was actually really cool just because like the person giving the talk was adorable, and they like basically said everybody like harps on maps as like being ugly and dumb, and she gave this amazing presentation basically saying that like cartography is awesome and has beautiful like unexplored creative areas of like visualizing things, and it was very convincing. So I recommend checking that out. Space, time, and state. This one was cool. It was a C# one, which is like super rare for OSCON. But it basically talked about MVVM pattern, and then like she did a lot of like Star Trek analogies, right? And so it was like, you know, with the photon torpedoes, blah, 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 but really focusing on how to make stateless code. Yeah, probably.
She was a .NET from
So yeah, but she gave this, did you see her talk? It was amazing.
Yes, it was awesome.
Yeah, so really cool, and definitely like something to strive for. Like the more you can make a stateless application, like the more clarity, the less bugs, the less like, if you've ever heard like state is the root of all evil, like there's a reason some people say that, because there's things that you don't think about that happen because you can't think about all the like complexities with it a lot of times. Caching is like the hardest problem. I mean, this all goes into state, right? 2 hard problems, whatever. Designing for failure, Uber. So yeah, this was like actually a management kind of thing. They're like, yeah, this is some stuff we did. Basically like build a website that like fails a lot, like prove that like, cause he's like, no matter what technology you choose and like what, how well you architect your application, right? Your app, if it's popular enough, will have failures. Hardware fails, your software fails. And the point is, make it fail. You be the one to make it fail to like show that you can recover from those failures. And they talked a little bit about what Netflix does, where they put, I forget their like monkey guy or whatever, yes. Chaos monkey. They like dump in there. The whole purpose of that thing is just to take down services to like show, like practice the resilience of their web services. It's kind of interesting. So that's their story. But coding in the flow. This one was cool. I feel like I'm going backwards through this, but that's fine. Coding in the flow is about like basically like how do you get in the flow with programming, and like it's a lot about like focus and getting your feedback loop and being able to like it's a lot about that. So you could read through this stuff, but let's see. General theory of reactivity. Oh, this one was cool, like the visualizations. But really, this is very similar. If you've ever looked at Eric Meyer's talks, he does a lot of the reactive extensions, so like reactive functional programming, the RX libraries. He talks a lot about like duality, right, and the inverse of IEnumerable, and creating like IObservable. God, I'm so sorry. I'm so embarrassed. But so he creates that, or he like talks through that. He's really fascinated with that. This is a very similar talk, but focused in JavaScript, and essentially what they did at Uber. And it was really cool, actually, the graphs that they showed at the end for like showing back pressure and like dividing things up to like calculate in a way that like is in a distributed system was really, really fascinating. So that was cool. Stop with the JavaScript frameworks. Matt talked a little bit about this like that last time. Essentially, he's talking about using web components. And essentially, if you like create web components and you've got reusable code that like, hey, it's part of the standard, so it's not going to be like, oh crap, I'm stuck in this framework or whatever. You have like actual reusable code. But there's a lot of controversy around web components and how successful those are going to be. So we'll see what happens. But I put down a lot of the code here that like was like summarizes essentially what you'd have to do to be able to create what he was talking about. This is like honestly like the Reader's Digest version of like throw some code in and that's essentially what it is. So that's why it's mostly JavaScript. This one was interesting. It's like chemical computing, trying to find like an analogy for like how to deal with things concurrently by using a reference of like chemistry, right? And like how chemicals react with each other. And then there were like parallels drawn. She's like, I'm not a chemist, but I thought it was a cool idea. And it was kind of interesting, but there was this like massive like jerk face guy in the front that was like apparently knew a little bit about chemistry and kept like trolling this person as they were trying to give their presentation. So poo on them basically is that. But there was some interesting stuff here. Is that seriously the end of that? No way. Where's the rest of it? Did I not save? Okay, well, hey, look at that. It's getting close to time, so like that's like a half hour. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
So the very first one you talked about, the convincing presentations.
Yes.
Did he indicate whether or not there's certain types of presentations that's not suited to? Like, no. You said you could use that in almost any purpose. He framed it as like towards technical talks because it was OSCON, right? And he actually said like, it's like your audience is really smart because it's like a technical talk, and so you have to give a talk in a certain way if you want it to be really effective. And it totally is like,
everything outside of the technology that you're talking about, like if you applied all of these things, then you would probably have people like using it that day or something. Especially like, it was really cool because I mean, you think about it, you get people engaged, and then like at the end of it, you have a call to action. It's really simple. You figure out a very simple way for them to get in and try it so they can be convinced themselves. Like imagine that, right? Like you have this concept, you're trying to get buy-in for it. You structure it this way where people are engaged and they want, you know what I mean? Like if you do it effectively is what I'm saying. Like it's much more likely that you will have acceptance and actual like action right out of that if you simplify that, right? Which is kind of cool. Actually, a great way to think about it is sometimes we'll have like the hackathons, right? Somebody will have an idea, they'll do like a prototype of it, and they'll be like, oh, look at this. And then people are like, we should do that, you know? And then it like turns into a thing. We should do that, actually. Hackathon should happen. But. So yeah, it was definitely geared at, you know, tech talks. He said that like the tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them, blah, blah, blah. That's for like management folks that like they basically want you to tell them like the dumbest thing and like make it dumb for them to understand. You know, he's like, they're never going to get it. Like you do that, like it helps them because they're like, everything's new to them or something. I don't know. Like, it's like, he like presents it as like, oh, you're already working with smart people. Like, here's how to do engaging one. But I can honestly see like it working pretty much just across the board, you know?
I think that format, that kind of older classical format of telling them 3 times is more for like cementing information that people really need to drive home. And it's not so much directed towards making an entertaining experience.
Yeah.
Something that people can watch. It's like people that have to listen to you. But if people don't have to listen to you, like they're there by choice, then you want to rope them into something interesting.
Right.
And you throw that whole repetitive thing out the window because it matters more that they're engaged more than that they exactly remember what you said.
Yeah. So basically, like if they have to listen to you, then like tell them what you told them, blah blah blah. If you're trying to get people engaged when they have no reason to be, then this would definitely be a better route to take. That's a great point.
Who was the guy that gave the presentation?
I think it was but
I wonder if he's like an engineer or if he does this for his books.
Well, if you go to the OSCON, actually, here, you want to do a browse session? No, I don't want to. But yeah, the talks are all online. So if you look up presentation ninjutsu, well, it has the it's got the schedule and like the summary, and so it'll have his name. It's funny because I heard about it and I was like, got his name, Google his name, trying to find video. I'm like, YouTube, this guy's name, nothing. This guy's nowhere. He's like this like avant-garde improv musician type, like, dude, he's like, how to give presentations. It's like the most covert, like,
he dropped like a smoke bomb.
Dude, he totally just like disappears. Yeah, he's like, cool. No, actually, I just wrote this down. I was really like, I had a few beers and I was like, yeah, this is gonna be good. So.
He did 2 PowerPoint the keynote speeches, which are freely available.
Yeah, watch the keynote speeches.
See it in action.
Yeah, see him in action. He's like kind of Aussie, so he's got a wicked cool accent.
I think that one of the presentations done at Fringe actually